Greetings and welcome to another Autodesk AutoCAD Build Your IQ webinar brought to you by Product Support. My name is Zach. With me today are Naman and Michael, and we are all over the country. We've got East Coast and middle of the country covered, so representing all over the place. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be attending from. Thank you as always for attending. And we'll get into our weekly webinar here. So here we are, as always, ever faithful here every 4 weeks, doing the Back to Basics track. Not sure if you attend any of the other webinars, but hopefully you do. But this is the Back to Basics where we try to cover things that are just that, very basic functionalities of AutoCAD, AutoCAD LT specifically. And hopefully we show you some things that you might not have known about the program, and you can get in there and dig in and find things that can help your workflows go a little more efficiently. And that's what it's all about, getting things done in less time. Time is money. As always, there's a chat window. Feel free to ask questions, and if there's time at the end, we'll answer as many as we can. The sessions are always recorded. They're posted up onto YouTube on our YouTube channel for the Build Your AutoCAD IQ portion of our YouTube page. And the data sets, the scripts, the PowerPoint slides, all that's available there as well. So coming up in our near future, we've got Beyond the Basics. Invoker's going to cover plot style tables with you next week. We will touch on that very, very briefly today, so as hopefully not to steal too much thunder from Invoker as he delves deeper into plot style tables next week. Coming up after that, we've got the third dimension, which is an introduction to cloud rendering in AutoCAD 2017, and that's where it's all going. Cloud rendering, very cool. No longer have to have a supercomputer to get really, really great looking renderings, because you can use our render farm in the cloud. Coming up after that, we've got setting up templates for your office in AutoCAD 2017. And that's another one of those time-saving things too. Instead of having to reinvent the wheel every time you start a drawing, get your templates standardized for your office and how your office works best, because we're all different. And then toward the end of September, it's us again, Back to Basics. And we're going to start into tables in AutoCAD LT 2017. Very powerful tool to use there. Here are a wealth of resources here in these links. And again, the PowerPoint slides will be made available after we're all finished and all the time up there. So all these links, really good stuff. So this week, we're going to cover plotting and what it is, a little bit of history. We're going to plot from the Model tab. We're going to plot from a layout. We're going to plot to soft plotters. And what do I mean by soft plotters? Well, we'll get into that. We're going to also plot to physical printing and plotting devices. We're also going to spend a goodly amount of time on the options and settings that go into plotting, because there are a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that really, if you set them up ahead of time, you can save yourself some time and effort down the line as you go through and plotting your various drawings. We're going to go through the Plotter Manager. We're going to talk about plotter calibration and what that means and why you would need to calibrate your plotter with AutoCAD specifically, because, well, sometimes you might have to. You might not know about that, so hopefully after we're done here, you will know what that means, and if you ever should run into a problem where you need to calibrate your plotter with AutoCAD, you'll have the skills and the knowledge to do it. And plot styles, again, we're going to touch on that very, very briefly, just in passing, really, so as not to take it too much away from next week's webinar with Voker. So before we get too far here, I want to find out a little bit about how everybody out there deals with plotting and how you and what you do with AutoCAD and AutoCAD LT. Before though, as always, our first poll is is this your first webinar that you've attended with us? So hopefully we have some new faces here. As always, we like to see return customers, but hopefully we get some new folks in, checking us out, and maybe along the way learn a thing or two. As always, on the learning end of things, I always like to point out we're not any substitute by any means for actual training. This is just going over some features in the programs here. So we'll close this poll out here. Go ahead and share the results with you there. Have a quick look. And as usual, overwhelmingly return customers here. We do have some new faces, so welcome. Thank you very much for attending. Hopefully you like what you see here and attend the ongoing webinar series that we do every week, and in particular our Back to Basics track here toward the end of every month. All right, so we'll close that one out. Next, which AutoCAD application do you use? Again, this is one we like to gather every time just to make sure that we're skewing our content. And in future webinars, we will be expanding into more of the vertical products. So we'll be covering AutoCAD Architecture, AutoCAD MEP in more detail than we have in the past. So that's exciting for those of you out there that use those applications. So we'll close that out, quickly share the results with you. Looks like the majority, well, I don't know if it's a majority, but more people in this webinar are using AutoCAD LT than any other product. How about that? We'll go with that. So specifically, we'll talk a little bit about plotting and publishing here. Do you plot from the Model tab? Do you plot from Layout tabs? Do you do a little bit of both? Or do you never plot anything? There are those out there that are strictly in a review-only kind of mode, but you might use AutoCAD LT or a full AutoCAD product to do those reviews. So I never plot anything is a perfectly reasonable answer in those cases. So looks like we've got about 3/4 of you have voted on this here, so we'll go ahead and close it out. I think that gives us a pretty good idea of where we stand. So thank you. I'll share those results there. A slight edge to people plotting from layout tabs, but a good amount of people plotting from the model tab too. Only a few only plot from the model tabs, and that's about what I would expect too, because layout tabs are really, have a lot of advantages, in which we'll go through later here. And then last one before we get into it here is a little poll on soft plotters versus physical plotters. And soft plotters, what I mean is if you're making PDFs, you're plotting to a PDF driver or a DWF driver or a DWFX driver, or you maybe have a JPEG driver, you're making JPEGs out of these. Anything is, that isn't a physical plotter. No hard copy. So, and again, this one looks like the results are coming in here. Looks like about what I would have expected. It's a pretty strong mix of both. And so we're just about to 80% there, so we'll call that good. I'll just quickly share the results out with you here on these. All right. So we'll go ahead and close that up. So let's talk about plotting a little bit before we get into the nuts and bolts of it in the program. What is plotting? How is it different from printing? Just earlier this week, I had somebody with the AutoCAD Mac product, and I don't think the word plot even really exists in that program. Everything's print, print, print. Although if you type plot, you still get the print dialog. And they said, well, I don't plot, I print. What is the difference? We'll go through it here. Long time ago, in the beginning, early days of computers, there was printing and there was plotting, and they were definitely not the same thing. Printing was reserved for, and to be fair, early computer printers were automated typewriters pretty much. They just had taken the previous electric typewriters and hooked them up to a computer, and boom, now you're printing from your computer, and your previous electronic typewriter is now doing all this what we call printing. But we do still have people doing blueprints and architectural designs and things, schematic, PCB printouts, things that you needed to draw lines and circles and arcs and vector kinds of things that we know that we can do in AutoCAD. And for those things, we had plotters, and more specifically, they only called them plotters then, but come up with a retronym, pen plotters, because, well, back then the only kind of plotters were pen plotters. But we'll move on here and take a look. This is what, or if you wanted to draw something in your computer, this is what it might have looked like back in the day. You had somebody painstakingly taken the time to convert a bunch of letters, as you can, if you look closer, that's just a bunch of letters all grouped together. And that's what computer artwork looked like if you just had a regular, text editing program and a regular printer that could only print letters. And a lot of people back in the day, you might recognize that sort of thing and think, wow, I remember those days. That's a while back. And indeed it is. So those things were sometimes created by what you see here. And what that is a corner of right there is a daisy wheel. And those, again, harken back to the days of electric typewriters where you just had a wheel going around and you'd hit the key and whatever hammer would come on and hit the paper. The next thing here, this isn't really from a computer printer. Honestly, it's from an electronic typewriter, but effectively that's what they took and put into the early computer printers to, to print from a drum head kind of printing device. And they would all be lined up with a ribbon, like you see there toward the back there, a ribbon full of ink, and your hammer would come along and hit the back of the key, and it would hit the ribbon and hit it onto the paper and make an imprint on the paper. It's very, I don't know, it seems barbaric, seems so far back compared to what we have today. But that's how it was. That's how it started. You had drum heads, the same thing. The drum would turn, the hammer would come along and hit it when it was in the right position. It would hit the ribbon onto the paper, and that was that. We've come a long way. What are these, you ask? Are they lipsticks? Are they the crayons you get for your kids at Red Robin? No, they are pens from an early pen plotter. This one's from a particular, I think it was a Commodore printer, or a Commodore plotter. So those are plotter pens. And the pennies there, just to give you an idea what size the things were. They were pretty small. And to give you an idea, and this isn't what things looked like then, but this is to give you an idea of what was going on, just a very crude representation. You had those little pens aligned to things attached to servos and motors and things that would move across the paper, and they would literally draw your lines for you based on what you were doing in your early CAD programs. It all seems so very, very long ago, but that's how it was. This, of course, is a newer device, and that's a modern pen in the thing. But the people have made devices now to act like the former pen plotters did back in the day. So that's a little bit of history and why plotting and printing are different words. But in today's parlance, really, in AutoCAD, you can use them interchangeably. We still maintain the plot command in AutoCAD just because, well, for if no other reason than it's legacy. And people like to think of plotting as something that only AutoCAD can do. Really, in today's wide format printers, I mean, they're just inkjets at this point. Big inkjet head connected to a long, metal rod that goes back and forth with the motors, and effectively it's just a large inkjet. It's just a wide format inkjet at this point. So there's really nothing differentiating them other than the size, really. So today when we use the word plot, usually we're talking about large format plotting devices, wide DeskJet or inkjet printer type devices. So how does this all apply to us in the world of AutoCAD? Well, let's go into it a little further, and at this point I will hand it off to my colleague Mike, and he will go through a few of the things with us. Then I'll take it back and we'll finish it on out and then get some questions from you and answer those as time allows. So here we are. I'll hand it off to Mike.
Thanks, Zach. So I guess I'm gonna show everybody what how to calibrate plotters on my end, but I kind of want to continue with that history lesson. That was actually really cool.
You're too kind. You're too kind.
Alrighty. So here we are in AutoCAD. So I'm in LT right now. So first and foremost, you have your drawing set up. You want to go in and actually be able to plot it. First things first, probably a good idea to actually set up your plotters. And for that, we have our plotter manager. So to access the plotter manager, you just go to the application tab up here, go down to print, then manage plotter. So that'll bring up the plotter manager. You'll notice that it is basically a Windows Explorer window that has quite a few files in there and a nifty little AutoPlotter wizard. So as you can probably imagine, I just got to this Windows Explorer plotter manager through the application, but if you really wanted to, you could also just open up an instance of Windows Explorer and go to this folder. By default, when you install AutoCAD, it'll go to this location. So, multiple ways to get to the same location.
That's a pretty long path, though. I think going through the application.
That is a pretty long one.
Yeah, that's much easier to go through the application. I don't want to remember that path. That's really long.
Yeah, you're right. But it's there if you want it. So, yeah, you'll notice that there's a few things in here. You have your PC3 files, so those are your plotter configuration files. You also notice that there's two folders in there, plot styles and PMP files. I'll be going over it in a little bit. So these PC3 files, they actually have the plotter configurations in there. If I were to open one of them, you can play around with some of the settings. So right now I'm actually opening up one of the built-in plotter configurations that already come when you install the application. So play around with paper sizes, that plotter calibration that Zach was mentioning earlier that I'm actually going to touch on in a little bit. You also have some custom properties that you can play around with. So that custom properties kind of changes depending on the plotter configuration that you're looking into. So what I'm going to actually do right now is go to the AutoPlotter wizard and show you how you would create your own plotter configuration. So as you saw, launched the AutoPlotter wizard. I have this nice little window that pops up, kind of organizes everything for me. So first step kind of is deciding what kind of configuration you want. So you'll have the My Computer or the Network Plotter server. You'll notice that it's mentioning an Autodesk Heidi plotter driver. So these plotter drivers actually are provided by the manufacturers, and they're optimized to actually work with AutoCAD. So they're not made by us, even though the name is right there, but it's actually provided to us by the manufacturers. For simplicity's sake, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a system printer. So I'm actually going to set up a plotter configuration with one of the printers that's already installed on my computer. So here's a few of them. I'm going to select this one because I know that this one's a stone throws away from me right now. Click right here. Then you have the option to import a PCP or a PC2 file. So those are older versions of plotter configuration files. If you want to bring it into your new PC3 file, you're more than welcome to. That's just import file, and you would just look for wherever you have those files located on your computer. I don't have one, however, so I'm just going to click Next. If you want to give it a special name, like printer that's near me, plotter that's near me, plotter that's on the other side of the room, go ahead and do that here. And then when you're finishing up, you're going to notice that you have the Calibrate Plotter option. So I'm going to remember that for a little bit. It'll come in pretty useful. So I just created my new plotter configuration. It's down here. This folder up here, the PMP files folder, this contains PMP files. What are those? So those are your plotter calibration files. And you may be asking yourself, well, why do I need to calibrate my plotter? It should plot exactly what I'm plotting on from the program. It should plot fine. Not always the case. Let me walk in here. I'm going to open up the PC3 file. Go to Device and Document Settings, Plotter Calibration. Then I'm going to go to Calibrate Plotter, and then you get another nice little window that's similar to the AutoPlotter wizard, like the configuration of it, but this one does something a little bit differently. So what you end up doing here is you end up plotting a test page. You can choose whatever paper size you want. Once you choose a paper size, it gives you a few values here, so you can decide what you want the height and width to be. So what this is actually going to determine the outcome of is the rectangle, or the square if you make it the same values. It'll print out a test page with a rectangle on there, and what you'll do is print the sheet out, which when I press next, it's actually going to plot it. Printed. So I'll go to the plotter, grab the sheet, measure it out, and then I could, right over here, you'll notice it says measured height, measured width. So at this point, you'll write down, okay, well, my 8-inch by 6-inch rectangle is actually 7.5 inches by 5.75 inches. I hope it's not that off, but you can go in there and actually calibrate so that the plotter could make up for that discrepancy in size. I'll click next because I measured it on my end. Take my word for it. Also, for anybody that's curious as to what it actually looks like, this is the famous Calibrate plot sheet. It's nothing more than a sheet that has a rectangle in it.
Now, how many times did it take you to get it zeroed in, Mike? Did it just take a couple times? And after you go back in and type in the actual measurement of the rectangle, what happens next after that?
What do you mean?
Well, when it first says it's going to go 6 by 8, and you grab the piece of paper off the plotter and you measure it, and it's just under on one measurement, and it's just over on the other, and you key in those values, then what happens after you key in those values? What does it do? Does it print out another?
It didn't for me.
Did it print out another rectangle and you measure it again?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Okay.
But
all the nuts and bolts stuff. Sorry to throw the detail in there.
Alrighty. So you have your, well, this is going to create a PNP file for us, but you have your calibration all done. Then you can, here you go, you can check your calibration and test it again. But what ended up happening there was I created my plotter calibration file, and it automatically added it to my PC3 file, so it attached it. You'll notice if I go back to Plotter Manager over here, and the PNP files should have that new PNP file right there. So, we went ahead, calibrated it, and added the PNP file to that PC3. So if you, for some reason want to, let me close out of this. If you want to, have multiple PC3 files for the same plotter, so have multiple configurations for the same plotter, you don't want to have to go in and calibrate at each specific time. You could just add, you could actually add the same calibration file to those plotter configurations, so you don't have to, keep doing it over and over and over and over again.
Now, in order to use the calibration values that I've done with my measurements, though, I need to pick the PC3 every time when I plot. Is that right? I can't just pick the system printer from which it was created.
Wait, what do you mean?
When I go to plot, I'm going to have in my list of available plotting devices, I'll have the PC3 in the list,
Yes.
but I'll also have USB-OS to PRN02 available to choose from the list. But I don't want to choose that one because then I won't get the calibrated values.
No, so
definitely want to choose the PC3 thereafter.
Yes, exactly. Because otherwise you won't be using that calibration anymore. You'll just be printing straight from the system plotter.
And your measurements could be off there, and that's the whole reason you calibrate it in the first place. Okay, gotcha.
Exactly. Alrighty. So we have our PC3 files, so we know what those, what these guys are. Something actually pretty cool. Let me open up one of these guys. So these are actually some of the built-in soft, soft plotter PC3s. So when I plot using these, I'll actually have a PDF. If you go into device and document settings, you can play around with some of the custom properties. And there's quite a few settings, well, not too many settings in here that you can play around with, but very important nonetheless. You can decide how you want the quality of your prints to come out. And then you could also include how much information you actually want in there. So you'll see data, so you can include layer information, hyperlinks, bookmarks, and then for the font handling, you can add that in if you want to as well.
If you're coming from a couple of versions ago and you're looking in your list and you're saying, hey, I don't have high quality print and I don't have smallest file or web and mobile, that's because those presets were recently added in the past couple releases of the products as a result of people saying to us, hey, I've got all these different quality settings I want to set, and I'm tired of going into my DWG to PDF PC3 every time and changing it and saving, and can you guys just give me some presets? So that's what we did. We gave 4 presets, and we think that it encompasses the majority of what people were asking for as far as the width of different types of quality settings that they wanted. So, and even the ones that we provide, you can of course still go in and edit them and change the quality settings if they're not exactly to your liking, and save it as a different file and use those from that point on.
Exactly. I think that was added in 2016, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So went over PC3's plotter configurations, went over the PNP files a little bit, and then the last one is plot styles. So in here, you'll notice that you have quite a few plot styles, and you may be wondering what are those. So these are plot style tables, and they contain several, like the plotting settings that you use when you're actually plotting your drawings. This actually lets you, you don't have to go over the redundant steps of deciding how everything is going to look when you're plotting it. So you'll have these files in there to kind of play around with the look and feel of what you're plotting. Zach is actually going to show you what, some different results that you get when you play around with them. And as we had mentioned earlier, Volker is going to go more in depth into how to create your own, how to play around with them. But I'll go over it very lightly right now. You might have noticed that there are 2 different types of plot style tables. You'll have the CTV extension over here and the STB. So they do different things. So the CTB one, or color dependent plot style tables, you specify the color, line weight, line type, and so forth of objects on a specific color. So, if you want to say, hey, everything on red, I want it to look this way, you can do that. Everything on blue, I want it to look this way, you can do that. So, hence the name color-dependent plot style table. The STB one is the name plot style table. There you can, again, specify color, line weight, line type, etc. of objects on a specific layer. So, everything on this layer that I've created, I want it to look a particular way. So, you have that option there if you want to play around with the look and feel based on the color or based on the layer the objects are on. You have that freedom. Like I mentioned earlier as well, Zach actually is going to go in and play around with these guys a little bit, so you'll get to see what I'm talking about. Alrighty. So now you may be wondering why I went through that and showed you all of these, configuration files, all the calibrate plotter, the plot styles. Like why go into it? Why can't I just go to print or plot and just select, a system plotter, one of my built-in ones. So the USB one that that we created the PC3 file, here you go. It's right here. Why can't I just select that one? Well, as Zach kind of mentioned earlier, if I were to select that one, I wouldn't have my calibration set in. That calibration comes in with the PC3 file. Additionally, if you're in an office that has a bunch of users, you probably want everybody to be, plotting consistently. So you're not having, hey, all the plots from that guy look one way, all the plots from that guy look slightly different. Same thing, just slightly different. It's probably a good idea to have everybody plotting consistently, and that's actually where your support paths come in really handy. So let me go over here. So under options, under files, so you're going to see the option for printer support file path. You see these guys in here. If you noticed, the directory that it's looking for was the same directory that we were looking at before. So this, let me actually pull it up. It's probably a little bit easier to visualize. Manage plotters. Keep bringing this guy down here. Go to options. It's going to go to the back. Okay, that's fine. Well, take my word for it then on that one. It is the same, directory, same location.
I believe
so you'll notice. Thanks, Zach. Glad you believe me. Everybody's so quiet. Just kidding. So here you go. You have a few options here. So your printer configuration search path, printer description file search path, and the plot style table search path. Printer configuration search path kind of tells AutoCAD, hey, go look for my printer configuration files here. So my PC3 files, go here, pull them from there, please. Okay. This one, the printer description file search path, it gets the .pmp, so the plotter configuration, or the plotter calibration, sorry. Pulls it from there. And the plot style table search path, as you could probably have imagined, pulls your plot style files, so the CTVs and the STB files. Now where this becomes really handy is you can store these files on a network location and then have everybody's AutoCAD point there, so that you're not using the PC3s that are on your computer. You're using PC3 files that everybody in your office is using, so that you have consistent plots in your office.
Can I complicate things for a second, Mike? I'm going to throw something in here.
If you want to, go for it.
A few releases back, we added the ability to, there's an add button you see over there on the right-hand side. If you add, you can actually add more than one path under each of these sections. It used to be that there was only one path available. So your plot style tables, you only had one path to one folder that would house your plot style tables. Now you can have multiple in here. So if you have some plot style tables that you just want to tweak around and mess around with, and you store them locally on your system, you can do that. You put the path in here. Also, as Mike mentioned, with the standardization in your office, you might have a path that goes to a network server that has the ones that everybody uses in the office. Now, the key here is, okay, well, what if I go to Plotter Manager, or if I go to Plot Style Manager? Which folder is going to come up in Windows Explorer? The answer to that is whichever one's higher up in the list. So the one that's directly underneath plot style table search path, for example, is the one that's going to come up when you go to the plot style manager from within the program. But just keep in mind that you can add multiple paths here in case you happen to have multiple locations from which you want to pull plot style tables or PC3 files.
Yep. Also, pro tip, if you're putting these files on a network location, you don't have to include the add a plotter wizard. So that way you don't have everybody in the office creating their own PC3 files in that network location. Just a little pro tip on that one. Alrighty, so moving on, there's a plot and publish tab over here. And this one has quite a few fun options, and this is where I'm actually going to hand it off to Zach, so that he can walk us through some of them.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. We'll wait for the screen to catch up to me here. And
there you go.
Excellent.
There you go. Floor is yours.
Thanks. All right. So hopefully everybody can see my screen at this point. We're looking at the Plot and Publish tab within Options, and there are a lot of things in here, so we'll try not to take too long to go through them, but try to give them all the attention they deserve. And speaking of not deserving much attention, this first section in the upper left-hand corner here, default plot settings for new drawings. Now, when it says new drawings here, it doesn't mean anytime you go up to hit File New and make a new file, because most of the time, File New is going to be pulling from a template, and a template is already going to have the plot settings and devices set up within it. So really, by and large, this first section, for new drawings, it only applies to, like, if you go through the wizard and you say start from scratch, it doesn't use a template for that. That's where this setting would come in. Or if somebody sends you a drawing from pre-2000 version AutoCAD, it also might not have the things saved in it. So this would apply to that also. So for the most part, this first section here, it's largely for legacy purposes, so you can ignore it. Feel free to. A lot of times people say, well, how do I set a default printer in AutoCAD? Well, the answer is you really don't. You set a default printer in your template so that anytime you make a new drawing file, the model tab and any layouts you've got set up are already set up to use your default or chosen printer device. But by and large, unlike most other programs, we don't have a setting in AutoCAD for what is my default printer. It's on a per drawing basis. So moving on, we've got the plot to file option here, and this is for any operation where you're plotting to a file, be that a PDF or a DWF or a DWFX, or if you are plotting to say a regular physical plotting device driver, like say, but you don't have a plotter in-house, like you've got a company down the street you take all your plotting jobs to, and they've got a 42-inch plotter down there. Well, they tell you what make and model it is. You go back to your system, you install the driver for that device, but when you go to plot, you check the box, and I'll show you where that is here. We'll go to plot. Oh, and while we're on it, whenever you go to plot, it's going to give you this warning until you tell it not to show you it again. It's a relatively recent dialogue that we have in here, and really it's just letting you know that there's this thing called publishing or batch plotting, so you don't always have to do a single plotted sheet in case you really want multiple sheets plotted. That's what this is for. But in this case, I want to go on and plot a single sheet, so that's what I'm going to choose. So this box right here, plot to file, if I choose any of my installed devices, I might have the option to plot to file. And when I hit OK, it's going to make a PLT file for me, a plot file. And it's that PLT file that's formatted with the driver for the specific device. So in the example that I gave, the DesignJet 500 that your printing shop has, you install the DesignJet 500 driver and you make a PLT file using it. You take the PLT file down to them and it comes out exactly the way you want it to. That's the theory anyway. You can, of course, when you plot to a file, it's going to prompt you for where you want to save the file. So this is just the default location. You can change it wherever you want to anytime you get prompted for where you want to save a file. So again, this is a setting that not a lot of people pay much mind to since you get prompted for it anyway. The next one, a little bit more important, background processing options. When you publish, since you're going to be doing multiple sheets in a published job typically, it's going to take longer than plotting a single sheet is. So for that reason, by default, publishing is set to publish in the background. And what that means is, as soon as you start the published job, it will return you back to AutoCAD, and you can continue doing what you do in AutoCAD instead of having to wait for all of those sheets to be sent to the printer or the creation of a PDF or a DWF. So that can save you time by going back in and it just runs it in the background. If you don't want it to run in the background, of course, you can uncheck the box here. And both of these checkboxes together, as it shows here in the tooltip pop-up there, the system variable background plot is what manages all this. Like, for example, background plot equals 1 might mean, and I don't know off the top of my head what they are, but it might mean publishing and is set to on in background, and plotting is set to work in the foreground, for example. So there are 4 different values of that background plot system variable, and that's what it does. Plot and publish log, this is where you want it to save. By default, it's going to save it to, well, it's actually going to save it to your user-specific folder for AutoCAD. And that's something that's set in the Files tab of Options. If we look at it real quick here, the log file location is this. Of course, you can change that, put it somewhere else. Doesn't really matter. And you can also choose whether you want one continuous plot log for all of your plot and publishing jobs, or if you want each one to have its own individual log file, which could really fill up a folder after a while. So that's why the default's one continuous plot log. It's easier that way to manage. Auto publish, disabled by default, not very commonly used from what I experienced with interacting with customers, but automatic publish does exactly what it says it's going to do here. It's going to make a soft copy of the drawing, be it in DWF format or PDF, whenever you do various options. And those options are determined in this dialog here. So we'll go in here. By default, it only does auto-publish when you save, but you can also say auto-publish when I close, or prompt me to do it when I save, or prompt me to do it when I close. So the prompt options give you a little bit more flexibility because it isn't going to happen every time. It is going to prompt you every time, though. And it's going to, by default, it's going to put it in wherever the drawing file happens to reside, or you can choose specific locations where you want the thing to go to. Again, auto-publish isn't all that popular of an option. I haven't hardly run into anybody who uses it, let alone brings it in for a support case, but it does come up from time to time, so it's good to know that it's there. So your general plot options over here, and this really only is if you're changing the plot device. So if somebody sends you a job or a drawing file and it's set up for their printer, for example, you're going to change it to your printer. Now, the default is to keep the layout page size if possible. So if they're using a wide format plotter and you are using a wide format plotter, keeping the layout page size, no problem. Okay, you can both do size D, no problem. The other option, though, is to use the plot device paper size. So if you're say printing to a device that can't go any larger than 11 by 17, but somebody sends you a D-size drawing, well, you're going to change from their plotting device in the drawing to your plotting device, and you might want it to use the largest paper size possible, which in this case would be 11 by 17. Otherwise, if it's set here on this first option, you'll get a pop-up that says, hey, look, your device doesn't support this paper size. What do you want to do? And it'll give you a choice at that point. System print spool alert hardly ever comes up. It's here, hardly ever comes up because most of the time you're not going to have a problem when you're plotting. As far as from a spooling standpoint, you might have other problems like the driver can't be found or can't communicate with the device, but this is just if you want to go back and track these errors in a log, that's what this is for. Again, most of the time never comes up. OLE plot quality. OLE is object linking and embedding, as you know, and it's whenever you copy something from one program to another. Like if you copy an image out of Photoshop and paste it into AutoCAD, it's going to come in as an OLE object. And this just determines what happens when you go to plot a drawing that contains an OLE object. So by default, it's automatically select, but you can standardize this if you want to and set it up so that OLE plot quality is always one of these 3 choices, depending on what type of OLE objects you have. Personally, I never set this in here. I change it within the property of each OLE object because it might be a picture, it might be a spreadsheet. Each OLE object you use might be a different type, so it might vary on what you want to set for the plot quality, and you can do that through the properties palette. Also, this here is the use OLE application when plotting. So if you, for example, copied something out of Excel and pasted it into your document, your AutoCAD drawing, would you want Excel to open up every time you go to plot a drawing that contains an Excel object? Probably not. But just in case you did, you can check this box and that'll happen. Hide system printers here. This means, and Mike explained to you the distinction between system printers versus PC3s. If you only want to use your PC3s that you have configured and you don't even want the choice to choose a system printer, you check this box and they no longer show up in your pull-down menu for selecting a device when you go to plot. And that can eliminate user error if you have both PC3s and system printers that have the same name, for example. That takes the decision out of the user's hand as far as which one they pick, if there's only one in the list to pick. Plot offset relative to. Most of the time this is printable area. There's edge of paper available, but and this is if you set up a plot offset when you plot, and we'll go over that in the plot dialog here. Plot stamp settings. If you want to use a plot stamp, you can configure your own plot stamp, and it'll show you a little preview over here. Some people use it, some people don't. It's something that's completely up to you. You can include all sorts of things on it, and here are the configuration settings where you want to save it. There's some advanced options as well. You can get really into the weeds on this, but know that it's there. That's the button that takes you there. And then plot style table settings. This controls what happens when you make new drawings. And again, new drawings, they mean new drawings based on no templates. So sort of an irrelevant setting in here for the most part. This goes between named plot styles and color dependent plot styles, which Mike had explained. Some other settings down here, but for the most part, this whole dialog in here. One thing here, if you go add or edit plot style table, this just launches that Windows Explorer window that we looked at before. It brings up the styles manager, and that also comes up if you go through the application menu and go through print and say show me my plot styles. Same thing there. So so that's that. Those are your options on the plot and publish tab within the options dialog. Now how does this all come into play when we go to plot? Let's do some plotting. Let's just do a quick plot here from the model tab. And by our poll, usually most of you are out there doing a combination of plotting from the plot tab, the model tab rather, and layout tabs. So if precision is important, and I'm assuming that it isn't always. You want to be able to plot to a scale by which you can take a ruler, lay it on the paper, and have things scale out correctly. So let's take a look at the plot dialog from the model tab. Page setups we're not going to get into here. That's another class. That's another webinar. But for my testing, I'm just going to use the DWG to PDF device for plotting. By default, it's going to plot to a file, of course, because it is a file. There's no other option when you're going to a soft plotter, so that's checked by default, of course. PDF options, you got your quality settings in here. You can change those if you like. Paper size, pretty self-explanatory. If you want to edit the paper sizes within the DWG to PDF, you can go into Properties, and you can go into your custom paper sizes here, and you can hit Add. And you can add paper sizes, adjust the margins, all that, saves it in the PC3. Updates the PMP file while it's at it actually too. The plot area just determines what you are plotting. So in this case, since I'm plotting from the model tab, I want extents. That means the extents of everything. Now I could do window, in which case I get a prompt to draw a little window around the area I want to plot. And if I do a preview of that, I only see just that small area that I selected with the window. But in my case here, I want to plot to extents. And here's where it talks about, we mentioned a moment ago, with the plot offset. This is whether it's either from the edge of the paper or from the edge of the extents of the objects. So that's what this controls. And if you want to center the plot, you can center the plot here. Now fit to paper completely ignores your scale and just does exactly that. It fits what you've drawn to the extents of the paper. Now at that point you're not really going to have any kind of measurable scaling, ruler to paper, being able to have it scaled correctly. So, but if you just want to show somebody as large as possible on the piece of paper that you have for the printer device that you have, go with fit to paper. For most cases though, you're going to be plotting to scale. Now since I'm plotting from the model tab, this scale option here becomes important. So what I've got, you can see back there is 24 inches by 18 inches. So I'm going to scale that, and I'm going to go to an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So I'm going to go, every 3 inches is 12 units. So for this top line here, since it's 24 units, that should come out to be 6 inches when I measure it. And so we're going to apply that. We're going to do a preview here. And this is a preview of my 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So you can imagine that this piece of paper is 11 inches long, or wide in this case, then the red line is going to measure 6 inches. So scale achieved. And that's the goal there. Plot style tables, if we want to apply one, like say monochrome, for example, it's going to make everything black, because the monochrome plot style just says, look, no matter what color it is, make it black. And there we are. Same thing goes with grayscale. You can have things shaded according to what color they were. You can see the dimensions are a little lighter than the rectangle is there. Shade viewport options. You're not going to have all these options in LT because LT don't have things like the visual styles here are realistic and conceptual and whatnot. So these are largely just the full AutoCAD versions, the verticals, but not LT. Your plot options here, a lot of check boxes. They're pretty self-explanatory what they do. Plot and background, we talked about that. Plot object line weights, we definitely want that. That's why by default it's checked in most templates. We assume that the line weights you've configured within the drawing, you want them to come out and be reflected on the paper, so that's why it's checked. If for some reason you don't, though, of course, you just uncheck the box and they come out all thin, and they have the same line weights. Plot transparency, that deals with whether or not you can see through objects, depending on what kinds of objects they are, like hatches, solid hatches you might apply a transparency to. By default, it's unchecked, takes more resources, and depending on whether you go into a physical plotter or a soft plotter, it can have implications there as well. PDFs with transparency are a little ugly, but still you might want to make them anyway, so that's why the checkbox is there. Plot with plot styles. Now we do want to plot with plot styles. From the model tab though, it's typically unchecked by default. If you're going to a layout tab, it'll be checked by default in most cases. Plot paper space last, that's checked by default. Hide paper space objects. Like when you plot, maybe you don't want any of the paper space objects to appear, like your viewport window, for example, or your title block. You just want the content of the viewport to plot. In this case, there's no viewport since we're on the model tab. That's why this stuff's all grayed out, because on the model tab there is no paper space, which is why these two sections here talking about paper space, they're grayed out. I can't do anything with them right now. Plot stamp on, we talked about that a little bit, whether or not you want to have a plot stamp. This just makes sure that it comes out on your plot. Save changes to layout. If I don't click this apply to layout button, all these things I've applied here, the plot style table, the printer, what have you, the paper size, if I just say OK and plot it, none of this stuff necessarily gets applied and saved. So if I have this checked and I forget to hit apply to layout, then when I hit OK and I complete my plot job, the changes will automatically get saved to, in this case, the model tab. Drawing orientation, pretty self-explanatory there. Is it going to come out portrait? Is it going to come out landscape? Do I want to plot upside down for some reason? And you can collapse this other panel over here, but most of the time you'll want to leave it expanded. So the other thing I wanted to cover real quick here is plotting from a layout. It's different than plotting from a model tab because scaling isn't handled in the plot dialog. Scaling is handled in your viewport properties. For example, I've got this top one here, and it is set to a scale of 3/16 inch equals a foot. This viewport down here, its scale is set for 3/4 inch equals a foot. So you can, since you can have different viewports and have different scales within them, when you go to plot, consequently, you're going to be plotting at a scale of 1:1. Because the layout is literally a preview of your piece of paper that you're going to plot. Or if you're making a PDF, it's the same thing. It's a preview of the page in your PDF that you're going to make. So when you plot from layout, again, all these things that we saw before when we plotted from the model tab, they're going to be the same. Now we notice that the things that mention paper space, though, the check boxes are now lit up in here, of course, because we have paper space in the layout tab, whereas we don't on the model tab. But all the other options are the same here. In most cases, extents and layout are going to be the same. Window, same thing. Display, there's a lot of question about what display means. And display, whether you're plotting from the model tab or the layout tab, it means basically what you see on the screen. So if I, for example, cancel out of here and I zoom in, okay, that's what I see. And if I go to plot now and I set it for display, and I want to center the plot maybe, and let's fit it to paper because I don't want to print to scale. And let's do a preview. That's what's shown on the screen. So it's not going to print my entire layout, whereas if I hit layout and do that same preview, I get the whole layout, just like that. So hopefully these things we've gone through here can give you some insight as to options you want to use for plotting. We didn't get into publishing. That's a different webinar, publishing. But plotting is something that whether you're sending out jobs for people to review or whether you're plotting them out to put them on a wall, whatever, it's something that's important to know how to do, and that's why we wanted to go through these settings with you today. Don't have a whole lot of time left for questions, but if we do see any in there, we'll have a look real quick.
Hey, Zach.
Yeah.
Can you just show them again the DWG to PDF settings, the dialog box, please? So how to get to it and.
Sure, you bet. So a couple ways you can get to it. If you've chosen it as your plot device, you'll have a properties button right next to it, which then brings it up. There's also the PDF options right here, which by and large are the same things that you can get into if you drill into custom properties here. Looks familiar, doesn't it? But with this properties button here, you get a lot more things available to change, like your paper sizes and whatnot. If you go to PDF options here, you just get more of the quality things, not so much the paper sizes or the margins or whatnot. But and you can also get through these as well if you go to the plotter manager, which brings up that Explorer window, and you can just double click on DWG to PDF, brings it up here. Same settings are all available in here. So I hope that answers the question. Before we go, we do want to throw out one last poll, and it's maybe everybody's favorite, I don't know. Let's take a look. And that is, did you learn something new today? And hopefully, even if it's the legacy stuff that nobody uses, maybe you didn't know about it. Oh, that counts. We'll take it anyway. All right. So it looks like just about everybody's voted there. So I'll close this out, and oh, we're getting a lot more no's now. I would say that's the long-term users chiming in there. For plotting, you know, if you've used the program for a long time, there really isn't anything newer under the sun. We haven't changed a whole lot as far as plotting goes in a long time. So let's quickly share the results up with that for you there. And they're about what they usually are. So that's good. And just to see if we can cover any last minute questions. Damon, do you see any in there that we could maybe hit real quick?
No, I just want to plug in my Revit IQ webinar.
Woohoo! Oh, absolutely.
Somebody's asking that question if there are any. So yes, we do have a Revit IQ webinar as well.
Fantastic. And as I mentioned before, we will be getting more webinars up for the AutoCAD vertical products as well. So we're really trying to expand this webinar series out to include a lot of the different products that people are using and let you know some of the cool features in all of them.
Yeah, that's called the AEC Collections webinar series as well. The next month is basically on BIM 360 Glue, and after that we'll come back to Revit again.
Perfect. All right. And with the slide deck that you have you'll have some of these links here, some basic resources for you. As always, you can catch up with any of these URLs here. And as always, we of course thank you for attending and hope to see you here next time in the Back to Basics webinar series.